All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. After the winter storm we had this past weekend, it's only fitting that it's International Snow Sculpting Week. Please send your pictures in to me. I'd love to see the creativity out there. In other news, we have a webinar today that we will be exploring how ventilation impacts health, comfort, and long-term value, and how building professionals can better explain those benefits to buyers. To do that, our panel of guests will talk about the ROI of upgraded ventilation systems, code compliance, best practices, and a whole lot more. Todd Usher is a nationally recognized leader in high performance, sustainable home building and the founder of Addison Homes. Drawing on his early career in chemical manufacturing and a deep passion for building science, Todd developed a precision driven quality system that ensures every Addison home delivers exceptional comfort, superior indoor air quality, outstanding energy efficiency, and increased resilience to natural disasters. Under his leadership, Addison Homes is among the few U.S. builders that construct every home to rigorous national standards, including the U.S. Department of Energy's Energy Efficient New Homes Program, the Environmental Protection Agency's Indoor Air Plus program. And Todd pairs his industry leadership with academic expertise as the director of Clemson University's Master of Real Estate Development program. He also holds 4 degrees from that university, including a PhD in planning, design, and the built environment, a Master's of Construction Science, and an MBA. Russell Pope oversees the product management department and is the industry development advocate for Panasonic Eco Solutions North America. Russell is an active participant in ASHRAE 62.2, Energy Star, Department of Energy programs, and codes and standards development. Russell is the immediate past chairman of the board for the Home Ventilating Institute, and he received the Future of HVI Award in 2014 and has served on the board of directors for EBA. Now, joining us to facilitate the discussion is Matt Power. He is the editor-in-chief of Green Builder Media. It's largely because of Matt that Green Builder Magazine was named Best Residential Trade Magazine by the National Association of Real Estate Editors for 8 consecutive years. Matt has an award-winning, nearly 3-decade career reporting on innovation and sustainability in housing. Now, our webinar today is brought to you by Panasonic. Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers. During the course of today's presentation, you could submit questions for our panel of guests. Simply use the Q&A function located in the menu bar at the bottom of the Zoom window. I'll review those questions, and once we are done with our discussion, pose those to our guests. Thank you very much. Matt, I yield the floor to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Mike. Nice introduction. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you today, and thank you for your time. Hopefully, it will be well worth it, and you'll get some tips and ideas that'll inspire you and maybe save you some money and help you to sell some healthy homes. So one thing I wanted to mention is that our webinars often go out to 2 audiences. It's both the professional, the contractor, the tradesman, trade person, and also just home buyers and clients. So I'd ask that our guests, our panelists, speak a little bit to both. I mean, we're going to emphasize more toward the pro side with this, but let's try to keep this understandable and clear so everybody gets something out of it. So I wanted to start out. I think it's great to have a builder on the call with us. And Todd, Addison Homes has been, sort of making its own way with green building on a lot of different levels. But I wanted to sort of dive into the sort of healthy home side of it, because it seems like you're sort of emphasizing that more. I looked at your website. I know you've got a lot of emphasis now. Could you sort of define for us what is a healthy home for those who aren't already versed in that?
Well, yeah, Matt, absolutely. And, I think part of our early interest or my early interest in the health aspect of homes came from my personal experience. I was a longtime allergy sufferer, still am. And before my building career, as I started learning about building science, was able to connect my allergies in my 1970s home with the ventilated crawl space and ducts that were not sealed well at all. And that kind of started this passion for me of digging into how we can make indoor air healthier for our occupants. So, from my perspective, both anecdotally and personally, I think that a healthy home to me means high quality indoor environment, and that primarily is air quality. But I think it also depends on each person. We all have different sensitivities, we all have different definitions of what a healthy home may be. And for some, that might just be comfort, where there's no temperature differences across the house. For others, it may be indoor air quality. For others, it may be the fact that it's quiet inside and you don't hear the outdoor noise. So I think there's a lot of different ways we can define that. And ultimately, when we talk to clients and talk about healthy homes, generally part of our discovery process is finding out what their definition personally is for a healthy home.
Right. And also, over to you, Russ, for a second. The codes themselves have changed, right? The more recent, like IRC codes, have a stricter requirement about ventilation and how much, how many air changes per hour and so on. And we had a little meeting the other day, and we were talking about this, and there's a lot of sort of a perfect storm of things that are happening out there, right? You got tighter homes are getting tighter and tighter. We got wildfires outside. We've got other types of pollutants that people are just becoming aware of. So tell us about from the code angle, like what does a builder need to know, Russ, right now that's happening? I know it's a little bit different in different markets. What are the key things?
Yeah, so absolutely. The usually where we're seeing more of the trends towards indoor air quality, it's kind of fortunately and unfortunately, because my opinion, indoor air quality should be more important than saving $20 a month on your power bill or something like that, But we're seeing that as the energy requirements are getting tighter and tighter, that the only way that you can do that is with a tighter home. And as that building envelope gets more tight, we get down to less than 3 air changes an hour. You're looking at requirements for balanced ventilation so that you know for sure that you're getting air in and out. So that's one of the things that we're noticing now. I think one of the things and what brought my attention mostly to Todd and Addison Homes is they're ahead of those code changes. So if you follow the trends, it's going to happen eventually. So the key is now to differentiate your homes while you have the opportunity before everybody else has to do it. And
Right.
that's really the opportunity, I think, for builders is to recognize how important it is to market those. I don't know that any countertop has helped anybody live a longer life or a healthier life or a higher quality of life, but indoor air quality absolutely can impact all of those things.
Let's talk to the builder who's always done it the same way, right? You've always put a couple of bath fans in. You've done, you know what the code is. You've met the bare minimum. You throw a range hood in, but each one of those things, as we were talking about the other day, it's in the details, right? You put a range hood in that moves too many CFM. That's too powerful. You've created an imbalance in the house, right? You put a bath fan in and you don't have return air for it to pull from. You can create a problem there. So we haven't really talked about ERVs yet. And maybe we need to, for people who maybe don't know much about ERVs, maybe they're not even installing them yet. Why don't we dive into the ERV mechanical solution a little bit first? Just assume somebody doesn't know a lot, and maybe that's to start with you, Russ, with those.
Okay. Yeah. So as we looked at those different ways to do balanced ventilation, so as the code has changed, there are traditionally a supply only or exhaust only ventilation strategies. Now, that's fine if you've got a leaky house like the old farmhouses where when air can come in freely from all kinds of places. But now as that building envelope is built tighter, you have to make sure that you have a controlled means of supplying and exhausting air. So it evolved from supply only and exhaust only to now we're seeing more balanced ventilation requirements. And now the changes from balanced ventilation requirements in general to ERVs specifically. Now we're even seeing them take over a lot of the traditional HRV because of the recovery of additional moisture.
Okay, so quickly, just for people who don't know the difference between an ERV and an HRV, you just lay that out in simple terms for people.
Yeah, so the HRV, it exchanges the temperature differentials. So the difference with the ERV is it's actually allowing exchange of excess moisture from one side to the other. So in these cases, there's a ratings for the products that include the value of that moisture transfer. Now, what that moisture transfer does, particularly in cooling season climates like the Southeast, is that reduces the load that either you're having to try to use your air conditioner as a dehumidifier for, or you actually do have dedicated dehumidifiers for those spaces. So that's why we're starting to see a lot more focus on energy recovery ventilators for that moisture content and the higher quality of cores that are made today. So used to an ERV would freeze and then there would be problems with it. Obviously now we've got products that can work in any region, including Alaska.
Right, and I know there's a lot more smart systems and sensors and this sort of thing, so you can really get a better sense of, what's actually happening in the house. I know you've got fans that have humidity sensors, that sort of thing that'll come on automatically and all that. Todd, you said something interesting. We were talking about this the other day. I asked you how you get around trade resistance, right? A lot of trade HVAC people they've never put in ERVs. They don't know much about ventilation. You had your own solution. Can you talk about it?
Yeah. So, we've built for over 24 years now, and from the very near our very beginning have built high performance homes, healthy homes. And for most of those 20 plus years, we struggled with finding the right HVAC contractor and getting our HVAC contractors on board. And over the years, just began to build our familiarity and expertise with the HVAC design process, the best practices for the design that we wanted to implement in our homes. And about 4 years ago, actually brought that in house. So we handle our own designs, procuring the materials and equipment, and then we subcontract the install labor and then supervise that to make sure it's done to our specifications and our standards. So we've kind of taken the dependency on the traditional HVAC contractor being the one to do the load calculation and the duct design and procure the right equipment. And really where I think we were expecting them to be too many things at once. And we've said, you know what, let's bring that inside, so that internally we can design the best system for our homes and not have to fight the battles of, oh, that system's going to be too small for this house, or that system's not going to manage the air quality correctly. And really, we're hiring the labor to install it and educating that labor as we move along. So what we're finding is that those install trades they get behind what we're doing, and they're not burdened with having to do what many HVAC contractors see as non-value add. So the load calc or the duct design, I think largely because the industry as a whole hasn't paid for that. They haven't paid the trades for that.
Right.
But that has become a very robust solution for us and allows us to truly dial in that system for each project.
Cool. Yeah, and I know one of the themes of this talk was sort of how to sell healthy homes, right? How to talk to clients about healthy homes. And we talked the other day about problem solving with ventilation, right? And some of the problems, for example, we brought up were indoor odors. If you want to get rid of unpleasant odors, the fact that you won't have to dust the house as much. You can control the amount of particulate, moving around the house. And the third one I think was wildfires and outdoor pollutants, right? So each one of those, I think, different ventilation solutions can help with, right? Russ, why don't you want to take first shot at that? Is how some of the ventilation, the more modern, innovative equipment can help deal with some of those problems and can be presented to clients as a solution.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're seeing have been in the market for a while, but we're still the adoption rate is still gaining speed, are the indoor air quality sensors. So there are devices now that you can actually sense the air quality, either their VOCs, particulate matters, CO2, that automatically do things with your ventilation system. So we're seeing more and more of those types of applications, and even looking long term of future predictions. An example, you may turn on your oven, and there's part of your home system recognizes that the oven was turned on and then predicts that because the oven's turned on, there's going to be contaminants generated. So it goes ahead and starts ventilating so that you get ahead of those activities. Um, Strategies including integrating with outdoor weather too. So, if there's a wildfire in the area, you may want to override your ventilation system altogether. I was telling Todd, I haven't shared it with him yet. I got to dig it up again, but there was some research that was done in the California area with energy recovery ventilators that actually they were using indoor air quality sensors to actually ventilate. And the difference with they were using demand-based ventilation, they significantly reduced their energy consumption because they found out that they didn't need to ventilate as often as the code minimum said. So in that instance, the houses they saved a lot of energy because they reduced the amount of ventilation. Now, that was a benefit for that home, but the other thing that you want to avoid is just because there's industry accepted minimums, that doesn't mean that it's the right ventilation rate. And sometimes you may need to ventilate at a lot higher rate to actually satisfy the needs of that individual home and the number of occupants and their cooking habits and everything else.
Right. And I don't know if every builder realizes too, but a lot of these, I always thought of ERVs as sort of standalone items, but a lot of the way ERVs and stuff are installed now is they're hooked into a central like HVAC system, right? So they can use existing ducting, or you can add it in. And Todd, you mentioned that you use quite a high filtration system, like a MERV 16,
Right.
which will catch wildfire, pretty much everything in terms of particles.
Yeah, generally, in
Yep.
all of our homes, we years ago we went to central filtration so that our filtration is on the unit at the air handler and not in the returns. And that gave us more flexibility with locating our returns and getting better air distribution throughout the house, but it also significantly boosted the filtration capability in the home. And so if we have a carbon impregnated filter, it will indeed scrub the wildfire smoke out of the air. But the MERV 15, MERV 16 that we've kind of settled in as standard just improve the overall air quality by removing far more particulates than any lesser filtration. And generally, we do have some people that say, well, wow, aren't those 4 and 5 inch thick media filters more expensive? And yes, they are. But what we find is most of our clients are only changing those once a year because they don't load as rapidly as the thin 1 inch filters in the return grill. And so if you looked at using a higher MERV rated 1 inch thick return filter and you changed it every month like you should, your cost would be roughly the same as one of these high efficiency filters, which is only about $100.
Right, right. Now, tell us from your perspective at Addison Homes, where does this healthy home concept come up? You got a new client walks in the door.
Yeah.
When does that conversation begin, and what's the hook? What's the thing that keeps the conversation alive?
Well, I think that many of our clients come to us because we're building a home that is differentiated than a home built to code. And that could be for a variety of different reasons. But a significant number of those come to us because they're interested in the healthier indoor air quality. Sometimes they'll have a specific reason. So, for example, we had a recent client that called and said, inquired about having a house built and said, we want our ducks inside conditioned space. And for us, that's like, whoa, that's a great prospect. That's a great lead because they've educated themselves on the importance of your heating and cooling ducts being inside the building envelope versus outside in a attic or vented crawl space. So
Right.
in some cases, as we began to drill down with that client in particular, it turns out they had a kid with asthma issues and they had
Yep.
lived in a house that had a leaky window that went undetected for many years until it became a mold issue in the wall and was associated with one of their children's asthma issues. So, clients that have something near and dear, like a personal experience, obviously come to this with a different perspective than, say another client we have that was just interested in us because we have better indoor air quality. No
Right.
specific reason, but they're investing a significant amount of money in a new home and they have young children and they want the best indoor environment for them. And
Do
I
you
think,
think that do
go
you
ahead.
think the pandemic, I always think the pandemic had a big influence on this. Like people got used to thinking about the air in their houses, and you get one person sick in one room and you're trying to isolate. I
Yeah,
mean, there were a lot of stuff going on then. Did it impact just overall how much attention people pay to ventilation?
I think it's not so much ventilation. Um, Healthy indoor air, probably so, but I
Yeah,
don't think the average consumer still understands what the variables are that make indoor air healthier. I don't think they
yeah,
understand that, oh, it needs ventilation or, oh, it needs better filtration. They just know it's better if the
yeah,
indoor air is healthier. And when you get into that discussion, certainly, then we go into we have dedicated ventilation, we have robust air filtration, we have dedicated dehumidification, and that's how we
yeah,
maintain the indoor air quality in the home. So I've found it's always an educational process with our clients. Usually they know enough to know that this matters. And when they come to us, they're looking for confirmation on why this matters and how we ensure that we're going to achieve what we're selling.
It's funny when you said that they know enough. I thought you were going to say they know enough to be dangerous when they
Well, in some
when they
cases they
show up.
do. I mean, we do
Right,
have
right.
some
And
clients
then,
that come to us and they've been
well,
watching
that,
YouTube and they've got it all
well,
figured
the
out.
fact that,
This is what we're going
right,
to do. And,
yeah,
you
and
know,
the fact that they know the term conditioned space, right? Like that
yeah.
alone, you're like, well, they've done that much homework. I got to have my best hat on here.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
when someone comes in and says something to that
yeah.
extent that
That
they want
level.
ducks inside conditioned space,
Yeah,
then all the sirens
yeah,
and bells go off
right.
and you're like, this is a hot client because they
Yeah.
Yeah.
understand, they're educated.
Yeah. And I do think, you brought up like the childhood asthma thing. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes, like I told you part of the story of my wife and I had our own story of why we got interested in it because we had an experience in a small, like a concrete block house we had bought. We were getting headaches like every morning or waking up with headaches for months. And we said maybe it's the air, and I got the little air sensor, and we had 1,600 parts per million of CO2 just from breathing in the bedroom at night. And so we put
Yeah.
an ERV in.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a Panasonic ERV. We put the sensor, so we dropped it down to 400 from 1,600. So it had an immediate headaches went away. I mean, I think there's some real people with mystery health symptoms sometimes,
Oh
like
yeah.
the ventilation sometimes lies at the root of some weird, health stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
maybe an
And
angle there too. Yep.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Matt, when you talk about the amount of time spent indoors,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
think of so at least if you're not lazy and sleep more than 8 hours a day, or you sleep less, that's still a third of your life. So a third of that time is spent in the bedroom. So shouldn't we
Right.
focus on those opportunities? So a lot of times with the ERVs, we're actually supplying fresh air into the bedroom with dedicated ducts.
Yeah.
In cases that they don't have it, we're recommending, maybe you want to have your bathroom exhaust fan in your master bath run continuously all night long to help extract some of that air, so that a third of your life is not
Right.
compromised by high CO2 because it's a small bedroom and there's a couple with two pets that are sleeping on the ground.
Right. Right,
for the
right.
bed.
And let's talk about noise a little bit. One of the things that comes up with ventilation, right? And it always the boogeyman of all ventilation was always the noisy fans in the bathroom, the noisy range hoods, etc. Um, I know that most ERVs are pretty quiet. From the ones I've seen, like the IntelliBalance hardly makes any noise. You mentioned something the other day, Todd, about keeping range hood CFM down instead of blasting range hoods at 600 CFM, having a more, I guess, a lower level, lower threshold there. You can get rid of a lot of the noise that way, right? If there is a noise issue, right?
Sure. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, you certainly can. And, take mechanical systems, for example, and that would include ERV, fresh air system as all part of the mechanical system. Our strategy has been to use variable speed heat pumps and tying in the fresh air and dehumidification somewhat with that ductwork distribution system, but running the air handler fan on ultra low speed continuously. And there's
yeah,
been
yeah,
debate in the industry about whether that's good or not. We found it to be very effective. One, it's quiet, you don't hear it run, and
mhm,
the inverter variable speed compressors turning on and off and just matching the load, meeting the demand. The other is we're getting continuous filtration and we're getting continuous distribution of the fresh air throughout the house.
right,
So,
right.
and continuous temperature distribution throughout the house. So, one of the things we often hear um, from clients is, I never hear the air conditioning run.
Right,
And
right,
when you properly size a system and you use variable speed systems with variable output blowers, that's one of the benefits. When you design the ducts correctly, you don't have whistling air running through the ductwork. You don't have the big brrr when the unit kicks on outside when it's a single speed unit. It just cruises along quietly, comfortably, and delivers just a fantastic experience to the occupant indoors. And that's another common comment that we receive when a client's moved in and lived in a house for a month or so. When we come back for our 30-day visit, usually it's, wow, this house is so quiet.
right,
Um,
right.
and you can tell people about
Yeah,
that on the front end. I often call it the tangible intangibles. Like I can tell you all day long that the
yeah,
house is going to be more comfortable, that it's going to be quieter, that you're going to feel better because of the air, but only when you experience it does it really mean
right.
anything.
Maybe we got to start having model homes with sleepovers.
Well, we've we've got a lot that we plan to have a model home built, and we've thought maybe we should just make it an Airbnb. And it
Right,
can
right.
be, a free weekend for any prospective client. Go experience what
I
it's
love that
like in one
idea.
of these.
They do a similar thing. The Babcock Ranch down here in Florida, big
Yeah,
development. Yeah, they have a couple condos they keep aside so people can come in and stay and kind of feel what it's like to live there. So I think
right,
that's if you can afford it as part of your plan, it's a pretty good deal. Yeah,
right, right.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Give the home. Mike says, give the home a test drive. Yeah,
Yeah,
give
give
the
it a
home.
test
Yeah,
drive. I mean,
yeah,
truly.
yeah, yeah.
And you know, over 20 plus years of seeing this, it's really become it's predictable. When we come in 30, 45 days after move in, we
Yeah.
generally know one of three or four things that we're going to hear from the client. So to be able to give someone even in a night or two that
Yeah.
experience, I think could make a big difference.
Yeah, Todd,
Let's pivot a
continue.
little bit, Russ, like to the just so we don't leave out people with existing homes who are thinking about improving ventilation. What are the tools available to them where or what would you recommend somebody comes to you? What like would there be a checklist like make sure the house is tight first, or what would you say to them? Said before we start selling you equipment, what do they
Yeah.
need to know, and what's the process? Yeah.
So it would include a lot of those things. It depends on their long-term goals and what else they have as part of it. Now, if it's just a healthy home type of assessment, and I think this is a term that we should adopt in the industry, is a healthy home retrofit. We do
Yeah.
remodels, right? We remodel bathrooms, remodel kitchens. Why not have this healthy home retrofit that we go in, or an indoor air quality specialist goes in and they monitor things. A lot of times they'll open up your underneath your cabinets. They'll look for places where there's mold. They'll maybe have a temperature FLIR device that sees where air is leaking in and out. But one of the easiest steps that anybody can do within the next 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 minutes, however they are far away from their bathroom, take a couple squares of toilet paper, turn the fan on, and see if it'll hold. If it won't hold, it's not working, right?
Yeah.
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 The foggy mirrors. So those are things that are clear indicators of if you're getting foggy mirrors, you're not getting enough ventilation. And those are
Right.
things that we have them look at. And if those devices aren't correct, then the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. So a lot of times we'll start with the exhaust fans and then go from
Yeah.
there. If it's tight enough, then
Right.
we would give recommendations for balanced ventilation, either through supply fans or ultimately the ERV devices.
It seems like, though, if you're doing major renovations, adding whole wings onto a house, it's a missed opportunity if you're not,
Oh, yeah.
introducing some new, modern ventilation in there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. One of the things that
yeah.
you alluded to earlier, Matt, too, is I think that's really important is, in designs of bigger homes, especially, you can create kind of isolation areas. If you've got a game room, for example, over the garage, or you've got another
Yeah.
space that's kind of separated, we're giving recommendations to maybe do a small ERV in that space, the Whisper Comfort, for example, that is dedicated for a small space, and do a dedicated air handler mini split or something in that location. Then you're creating not only an isolation zone if somebody's sick,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
if you're looking to run space with a generator, you can also isolate that individual room of, we're just going to provide the power to that room and have that room really comfortable and run that
Great idea. Yeah.
with the generators
Yeah.
and other things during storms. So
Yeah. It's funny, man. Yeah, my mom came down and visited me a couple weeks ago, and she showed up sick, and had the flu, and so we isolated her and did exactly that in the back room with its own bathroom with its own fan. But it was great having that space where she could be comfortable, but also not get everyone else sick. So
yeah, I hope you left the
definitely.
fan on there too to create that
We
negative.
did. We shoved some
That's
food
right.
under the
That's
Yeah.
door
right.
every so often,
That's right. That's
and a
right.
bottle of wine.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was good.
I'm the nerd that anytime we stay in an Airbnb or even sometimes a hotel, I'm the guy with, that goes into the bathroom, stands on the toilet with a piece of toilet paper to see if the bath fan's working. And my
Yeah.
family is just like, what are you
What are you
doing?
doing?
And, I want them to remark it like, there's no airflow on this bath fan. And they're just like,
Yeah.
what? Whatever. Dad's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say you go in with the white glove, but that's just too scary.
No, that is a little scary.
Yeah.
That's a little scary.
Yeah. So Russ, let's say, somebody's, likes this idea of the healthy houses. Maybe they're a builder or a contractor and they're like, what's the suite of stuff that I'd want to put in, right? They may know about bath fans, but you've got a bunch of stuff and you've got some new products in the pipeline. What's some cool stuff that maybe they want to take a look at?
The first thing that we would do, and I think it's really important, is to have the actual conversation about what the goals are, what the house structure is, to make sure that we're supplying the right products and we're addressing the climate zone, for example. There's significant differences in, even in areas that are 10 miles apart in California, for example. You've got these different swings. You've got the Southeast and you've got anything that's coastal that's really humid. So those are some of the first steps, is determine, okay, what are the conditions of your home. You're building to code, you're building above code, and then we can
Yeah.
find the right products. One of the things that we try to, it's always hard to do to not say, well, you need to buy this best product because it's the best, and it is the best for them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we have to gauge the appetite of the builder for the cost of the products that they're installing, right? And the stage
Right.
that they're in. So I think our conversation with Todd was, the other day was, okay, they started with these bigger chunks. They got the air conditioning right. They added supplemental dehumidification. The next
Yeah.
step is probably now ERVs. So those are the types of things that we have those conversations with the individual builder to make sure that we're addressing their specific needs and also,
Yeah.
trying the best we can to manage the pressures that they have from their purchasing group to buy the cheapest product they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
and I
I just
think
got a
that's
question from somebody. Russ, is Panasonic going to be at AHR at the show, trade
Yeah,
show?
absolutely. We'll
Yeah.
be there
Yeah.
in
So Sylvia, I think we got an open, just got an open Sylvia. I think, I don't know, are you personally going to be there or just or people from Panasonic to
yep,
talk to
no,
pros? Yeah.
I will be there and we'll have
Yeah.
we're gonna have a
Okay.
trade
That
space
that
and
was
products
Sylvia.
and absolutely, yes.
Okay. Good. 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 Um, That's great. So let's go back to you for a minute, Todd. So let's talk about climate specific. You're in a hot, humid climate, right? So you're south, well, not all, most of the time.
mixed humid. Yeah, mixed humid,
What are
but
the what
often.
are the right, right? What are the special concerns of ventilation in your type of climate?
Well, the biggest challenge in our climate, being a mixed humid climate, are the shoulder months. So in the spring and fall, when we don't have much demand on our air conditioning, therefore, typically, if air conditioning is your only dehumidification source, you're relying on the AC to remove moisture in the home. If in the shoulder months we don't need air conditioning, we basically have no dehumidification. And if you
Mm,
add ventilation in on that, it doesn't matter if it's an ERV or straight up ventilation, you're going to be adding humidity to the indoor environment. And ultimately, that's what led us to add dedicated dehumidification to our homes about 4 years ago. It is we were getting the envelope so well sealed and insulated that those shoulder months became very challenging to
yeah,
maintain proper humidity inside the home. And I think in
yeah,
any humid climate, that's one of the challenges. Anytime we ventilate, even if it's an ERV, we are exchanging some of that moisture, but net, we're adding moisture to the home. So we have to keep that in mind.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
telling, I think all of you on the recent call, I had a blower door testing person here in our area that I follow, and he had made a post about a super insulated home that he went out to take a look at. It was all spray foamed and super airtight with no ventilation and no dehumidification. And bad things grow when that happens and you don't
yeah.
address holistically the indoor environment.
So there's a little bit of it's always been the challenge, right? Is how do you keep your energy costs low at the same time get that minimal level of dehumidification?
Yeah.
There's different strategies. Maybe Russ, what would you say? Because I know one of the key ideas of an ERV is it saves you money over just opening a window, right? Just open a window, you're letting all that conditioned air out, whereas an ERV is exchanging the latent heat, I guess if I'm putting it right, in that air, right? Or the latent energy in that air. So
Yeah,
how can maybe how does a builder talk about people say, hey, if we add this ventilation, it's not going to drive your energy bill up, and here's why it's worth it.
yeah. So the biggest part of that though is the cost. It's expensive to remove moisture from the air, whether it's the air conditioner running or a dehumidifier. So the idea is you want to remove as much moisture as possible before it comes into the space. Now, one of the
Right.
questions we get, and we always say, we warn people, an ERV is not a dehumidifier,
Yeah.
but
Good
Right.
point.
it certainly reduces the load that you would have to do with dehumidification or air conditioning. So by bringing in that fresh air and removing some of that expensive moisture that you're not having to deal with because it's exchanging to the core and rejecting some of that, then that's where you're
Yeah.
going to get those energy savings. And that's one of the metrics that we're trying to get more attention towards is that moisture transfer ratio. That we've got a lot of metrics for the temperature difference, but that moisture potentially has a bigger impact on energy savings, I believe, than that temperature transfer. And when you talk about things like HERS ratings, and if you can remove some of that moisture with dehumidifiers or ERVs, then you can get a smaller air handling system that, these things can chip away at your ratings and your scores.
Yeah.
So that's really
Yeah.
important for us
Yeah.
to try to keep an eye holistically. How do these things work together?
Yeah. It's interesting. I read a lot of, white papers and stuff, and somebody did a white paper on the condensate from, mini splits and condensers and stuff. And they found it's surprisingly clean, right? It's like not, it doesn't have much toxin at all in it. And so I actually hooked up, I had a couple of them on my house in Florida and hooked them up, put them to my raised beds and used them as a watering source. So there's like it's kind of geeky, but it's like because you're pulling so much water out of that air all the time. It seemed like get a little bit more use, but maybe down the road there's a constructive use for some of this water that we're extracting from the air. We get double duty out of it.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's the other part too is, Todd and I talked about it a little bit earlier this week. Just that, um, how do we ventilate the appropriate rate, and how do we
yeah,
find that right balance? And one of the things that they used to say, and some people still say, dilution is the solution, and it's
yeah,
not. It's not anymore. Now you have to look at other things. Now filtration
yeah,
is extremely important. If your air is already the right temperature inside and all you need to address is particulate matter, then filter that air on the inside. And like Todd said, have that system run all the time, because in your
yeah,
case, Todd, I'm sure you don't have that same problem that Matt had with high
right,
CO2 in the bedroom at night, because you're continuing to flush and redistribute that air on a
That's right.
right,
yeah.
That's right.
right,
Yeah.
right. That's a good strategy. Yeah. So, talk about, one of the things we brought up is that ERVs, surprisingly, even though they've been around a long time, there's still sort of an educational gap, I feel. And, I talked to a lot of people in the industry. And, I've had many builders, even like a year or two ago at the builder show, two or three guys, when I mentioned ERV, they said, what? Like they looked at me like, what's that? And I'm not saying that's everywhere, but there is a lot of information that hasn't reached all the way through yet. So, why should it, right? Why should we get the word out a little bit about some of these new innovations and new ventilations? If they've done business the same way for 25 years, what's in it for them?
Well,
So
go
go ahead.
ahead, Russell.
No, you go.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to say,
yeah,
if they've done things the same for the past 25 years, the reality is they're not, because building codes have changed and building codes have improved, forcing them to do better things. And one of
right.
those things is build tighter homes, whether they're trying to or not. Just simply by following modern building codes, the result is tighter, more insulated homes. And with that, we have to recognize that indoor air quality can suffer. So the fact that we have dedicated systems that can manage that indoor air quality, like ERVs, is very important for folks to understand. And Russell mentioned this earlier. I think it bears repeating, because I hear this as a common misconception. ERVs are not dehumidifiers. They will reduce the humidity load in the air coming into the home by exchanging it with the exhaust air. But it's important that builders understand truly that house is a system approach, so
Mhm.
that, like Russell said, if you've got a particulate challenge, filtration. If you've got CO2 challenges like you, Matt, ventilation.
Yeah,
And all of that works together. And it's, I think, ultimately up to the builder to educate themselves to know what the right solution is for the given scenario. And that's where working with manufacturers who are super knowledgeable, working with, you know, media partners where they write about these things, that
yeah.
there has never been more robust information and knowledge for builders to go out and find to educate themselves.
Yeah. I think that build to rent market too is way underused as ERVs, because there's so many perks, if you've ever been a landlord, that you get from running an ERV in a rental. then it doesn't matter if the tenants run the range hood. You're not going to have a place or they're smoking illegally in there, or it's going to deal with a lot of potential issues. Over time, it's sort of like an insurance policy. So I'm surprised. You see mini splits everywhere now. That's endemic, right? There's mini splits on every new apartment or build to rent property that's going up. So are the ERVs going to go next? Are they the next big thing?
They already are in a lot of
Yeah.
places. So one
Yeah.
of the things that we're seeing, especially if there's energy codes, or some of the stretch codes. So if somebody wants the basic residential code and then the stretch, but
Yeah.
places like New York City require all of the new dwellings in the city to have energy recovery ventilation.
Oh,
And
that's good. Yeah.
and we talked a little bit about negative pressure when your mother-in-law was in the bedroom, but we do the same thing. So we want to make sure that in those cases we want positive pressure in multifamily or those types of locations, because you don't necessarily like the smell of fish being reheated in the
Your
microwave.
neighbor's cooking
Yeah.
or whatever, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Right.
you want to pressurize that space to make
Yeah.
sure that you're not sucking in other stuff. So that's one of the things that people really like, that feature, to be able to positively pressure, or if they have a specific need to negatively pressurize, you can actually do that with the tighter building envelopes. Now, if it's the
And I
leaky
can,
load farmhouse, it
yeah.
doesn't matter.
No, and I,
Right,
and I can
right,
imagine, especially, you buy a luxury condo somewhere, you don't expect to be breathing in your neighbor's cooking, right?
Right.
I mean,
right, right,
you have high
right.
expectations. They're going to have some very upset buyers if they're not, if their space does not feel like their space in terms of air, right? So
Right,
an
right.
argument to be made there too.
Well, and I
Uh,
think another point there when it comes to pollutants is not only the fresh air in, but the bad air out. So an ERV obviously does that, but also your bath fans and your range hood, making sure that those are terminated outside of the building is huge. We talked about it when
yeah,
we were talking earlier this week, is older homes where that bath fan just piped right up into the attic.
right.
Um, you guys were reminded me of my first college apartment where when we ran the dryer, it went into the wall and it didn't
Yeah.
come out anywhere. So the whole place smelled like whatever your laundry sheet or detergent was. And it was like, this is weird. It's getting really humid and musty in here because the dryer was piped into the building cavity. You
And they
know,
used
it,
to sell those. They used to sell those as
yeah,
energy savers.
the
Remember,
boxes,
the
right? You put
boxes you
water
put
in
on
it
and
and it would, yeah, it
save
would,
you energy, but
yeah,
it also grow
that's,
black mold in the wall. But
that's right. That's right.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. No,
All in the
yeah,
name of
times
energy
have definitely,
savings.
yeah. I mean, we definitely come a long way since then. Um, we're getting close to 10 minutes, so maybe we ought to take a few questions if save a couple minutes. As somebody says, Nicholas Phillips says, unfortunately, I see a lot of brand new homes that still don't dedicate their exhaust fans to the outdoors. I think that's true. You
Well,
mentioned the yeah. Go ahead, Todd.
I
Yeah,
mean, in our
yeah,
market, the code does not require that we terminate the range hood fan to the outdoors. We can still have
yeah.
the recirculating fan with a carbon filter, which, when I go into a house and see that, it's just so
Horrifying.
ridiculous. It
And
really
they've
is.
done the research. They've done the research on it. They said the
Yeah,
way those work is basically when they're new, they catch about 20% of the particles, and then it goes down from there.
right,
So
right.
so they never really do
and and
much.
and the research also shows that the bulk of particulates come from cooking. And
Yeah.
so, especially if you're using natural gas or propane, the particulates that come off of that combustion is, I mean, it's amazing. I've
Yeah.
taken a particle counter above my gas range and
Yeah.
seen that firsthand. But, you know, folks like cooking with gas. So it's just very important to have that range hood and to use it and
You got
make
to
sure
get it
it's
out.
ducted outside. You got to get it outside.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Do we want to go back to Mike, back to you? And if you've got any questions, we could try to tackle a few questions in the last few minutes here.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions, and then if others do have questions, please go ahead and send those in via the Q&A
Yeah.
box or option down below.
Yeah.
Jan wanted to know, going back to the air filters, The those kind of cheaper 30-day filters, do those allow particles into the air handler?
Are you talking about 1 inch filters or?
No measurement given in the question. It was just, some of those cheaper, quote, cheaper 30-day filters.
Probably, I'd say that I'd
Yeah.
throw that. It's probably what she's talking about, Todd, huh?
Yeah, probably so. And
Yeah, yeah,
that bears mentioning too that you need to be very careful when you have an existing home that was not designed for a high efficiency filter, of adding high efficient filters to that, because those can actually reduce or increase the static pressure, the resistance to airflow to the unit, and make the
yeah.
fan blower work a lot harder. And in worst case, could make it fail
You
prematurely.
could burn it out.
You could burn it
Yeah,
out. So
yeah, yeah.
you want to be very careful of upgrading your filters if the system was not designed for those. But generally, you can think the thinner the filter, doesn't matter if you can't see through it or not. If you can see through it, it's not great filter. Um,
Right.
you know, we always talk about the spun bonded blue filters. Those are to keep the animals out of the air handler,
Right.
you
The
know.
mice.
They'll catch the
Right.
mice, but they're not
Yeah.
catching many particulates. But even the thin filters, as you get into the higher rated effectiveness, they're not going to be anywhere near the capability of the thicker 4 and 5 inch pleated filters. The 4 and 5 inch have so much more surface area, they don't actually reduce that airflow as much as the thin filters that are more effective.
Yeah.
So
And
be
it does
careful.
come back to your trade guys too, like if your trade guys, or people, I shouldn't say guys, but if they know what they're doing, right, they're gonna
Right.
know the difference between a particulate filter and basically just a casual, more for appearance than anything else filter. So, it is probably going to cost a little bit more for an HVAC system that has a good 4 inch filtration system and a powerful enough blower fan. So you are going to spend a little more, but it's gonna my argument would be it's gonna be worth it over the years. Yep.
Yeah, and there's some great resources online. If you just Google EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, MERV, MERV, the EPA has a great resource guide that will kind of guide you on MERV ratings and what that means in terms of particulate capture.
Yeah.
So that can be a great tool to evaluate this filter versus another.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where the follow-up question from Jan comes from, actually. Isn't it wise on older systems to use a MERV 6 or less? That's the question that was asked.
That that's a that's one of
Depends, right?
those, it depends, right? That's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
when my students ask me questions about the real world, there's often
Yeah.
we laugh
It,
because I say it depends so many
yeah.
times. And really that it depends on your system and how the ductwork was designed as to what impact even a MERV 6 might have on it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You're a little bit stuck though. If you've got an older system, you're looking at it's a pretty expensive upgrade to
It
go to the
It
next
sure
level.
it sure
Yeah.
can be, because
Yeah.
often that means redoing the ductwork. The
Yeah.
ductwork is what kind of establishes that pressure drop across the air handler. And if you don't have enough capacity for an additional pressure drop, then you're typically going to have to replace ductwork and make it larger.
Well, yeah, I'd add to that one thing, Jan, too, is to make sure that ductwork is sealed properly, right? So
Right.
is that there's no leaks in it. If possible, it's insulated because you start getting cellulose or fiberglass insulation dust in there from the attic. You can really add to your particulate load without even knowing it. So definitely.
All right.
Right.
Got another, of course, Mike. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mike,
lots
you
of
got
lots of
any?
good questions coming in too here, guys.
Okay,
So if we could get to a couple more here.
sure.
Nanette, and I thought this was a good question. You talked about the different audiences, Matt.
Yeah.
What common appliance or a commonly used appliance or technology could you relate, kind of give us a comparable when you're talking about the energy consumed by either an ERV or a continuous exhaust fan?
Russ, do you want to take that one?
So I'm assuming the amount of energy that it takes to run it. the device. So all of
Right.
these are typically 50 watts or less for ERVs. For most of the products that we have, you're certainly always less than 100 watts, which is the one light bulb. But like our exhaust fans, for example, running at a continuous speed, it might be 7 or 8 watts, which
Yeah.
it's almost immeasurable. Your computer, when it's plugged in and not even turned on, consumes more power than a continuously exhausting fan. But the part that you have to be careful of then is it's cheap to move air in and out of a building. The expensive part is reheating it, cooling it, humidifying it, or dehumidifying it. So that's part of finding the right balance. But the actual energy consumed of the devices is very small for the air movement portion of it. Now, with the
And the idea is it's saving you energy as well, right? Like the ERV, because it's exchanging energy, the energy in the air.
yeah,
Right?
and there are
Yeah.
some calculations. We've been working with Ecotrope, and Ecotrope is one of the rating software program groups, and we're having them look at those. Give us an example of a home in a very cold climate that is just doing not using an energy recovery ventilator, and let's do those calculations and come through and see what that difference is and see how that affects the HERS ratings. And we found some pretty substantial information that is beneficial as we look through those things and see how do we start adding value to those other metrics of an ERV, and how do we put that into things that the builders can use to help chisel down their HERS score.
Yeah. And especially, if your answer before having the ERV is to open a window a crack, the amount of energy you're losing, the savings with the ERV is going to dwarf that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and you have to keep in mind too, we haven't mentioned this, but ERVs incorporate filtration into the
right.
ERV. So you're filtering that fresh air you're bringing in,
Yeah.
and it's not just like opening a window on a spring full of pollen day.
Right.
That's
You
all
talk,
getting filtered out.
yeah, the old blue
Yeah.
filters are much better than a window screen.
Right, right. That's right. Yeah. But they both catch birds
Right.
and mice.
Um, Clement had a question about what's the latest information on electrostatic slide in filters?
Electrostatic.
They're the
Slide
ones, yeah,
in
slide
Or
filters.
in.
sorry,
Do you have any in your, sometimes they're used with the 4-inch filters. Do you happen to install those, Todd, or?
Yeah, I mean the big thing is if they're powered, then you have to be very careful because many of those types of electrostatic filters generate ozone, and ozone is a lung irritant. So we generally don't want ozone to be produced and added to the house.
Yeah.
Um, I do remember about 30 years ago when I started discovering my crawl space connectedness with my house before I sealed it. I went to one of the HVAC suppliers and they had this washable electrostatic, they called it. It wasn't powered filter. And I don't think those filters have MERV ratings to speak of.
Right.
So I would stick with media filters that are MERV rated as
Passive.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I mean, I have heard good things about the UV lights, the type that essentially that kill viruses and that sort of thing. They're pretty easy to add on to, but that would be specifically for virus, not for particulate removal.
Yeah,
You
and I don't believe, I mean, I think much of the debate on the UV light is the UV light definitely can sanitize the area inside the air handler that the
Yeah,
light is hitting, but it really
yeah,
can't sanitize the air as the air
that's true.
flows through.
Too fast, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's too fast, not enough dwell time.
Yeah.
So, Mike, why don't you throw a couple more at us before we run out of time here? Yeah.
oh yeah, definitely. This one really is probably more for Russell.
Okay.
So Byron is going to build a new construction and doing it on spec. And Byron's looking for a recommendation on how to market some of these upcoming projects that he's got with the Panasonic Oasis system to help make it kind of a greater appeal to his demographic. Any suggestions there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So definitely reach out to our team. The Oasis system, Todd, I don't know if you've seen it, but it has some of the similarities as far as continually moving the air, where we're
Right.
using mini splits and exhaust fans to do, high volumes of air move through the house very quietly. So definitely, Mike, there's opportunities for the further Oasis discussions, and most of that ties to the things that Todd talked about: the comfort, the distribution of fresh air evenly, the consistent temperature throughout the entire home, and the quiet operation. Most of the time, if there's noise related to that system, it's probably velocity noise of, that you're trying to put too much through the wrong type of register or something like that. So
Right.
it's in stable comfort levels, quiet, very energy efficient. So
Just for
definitely,
people who don't know, the Oasis system is a Panasonic initiative. And I think it's like if you were going to the Builder Show or the AHR, you probably could learn all about it. We decided not to get too much into detail on this, but it is pretty cool. It's got, a lot of their products and a lot of the most innovative, smart science connected with it. So if you want to learn more about it, I would go look that up on their website to start with and
yeah,
talk
I'm
to
really
Russ
interested
directly.
to see
Yep.
the data from this week in Houston, because it is built in Houston. We purposefully built it
Yeah.
in one of the worst climates possible for trying to manage moisture.
Yeah. Yeah. How about another one, Mike?
Oh
Then
yeah,
we'll call it.
we got plenty more, Matt. If you, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
much
can
time
I
we've
can
got.
stay a little late for you guys. I think we got a couple of minutes extra we can
Yeah.
add on.
Yeah.
Get some. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So Nicholas wanted to know, can you talk about the need for calibrating built-in IAQ sensors for the sake of system longevity?
Hmm.
So the residential type devices are self-calibrating.
Okay.
And so they're a completely different level. So when I talk
Right.
about most of the common residential indoor air quality sensors, there's a significant difference between the residential grade, the commercial grade, and then the laboratory grade, right? So
Yeah.
most of what we're looking for on the residential side are just a trend indicator.
Mhm.
It's not precise, but it's
Right.
definitely relevant readings that we're concerned about. So if something has changed to a level that is relatively or relevantly not acceptable compared to how it was before, for example, then we know that something needs to be addressed. So that's where a lot of the residentials are. The other part of that is the equipment is available, but the cost implications of that are significant difference, tenfold cost differences in some of that equipment and need for continuous maintenance and calibration and those types of things.
Don't you have a partner that you work with, Panasonic also that does certain, plug-in modules, that sort of thing?
Yeah, those are the Swidget devices. So
Yeah.
they're incorporating either wall switches or receptacles with Wi-Fi modules to communicate. And we actually have communication devices for our ERVs and some of our premium fans like the Whisper Green Select that we can do some of those more advanced things. Like if your exhaust fan is turned on, for example, then it will tell the ERV, for example, to supplement an additional CFM, supplement 30 more because the exhaust fan was turned on. So we're
Right.
utilizing
Right.
those systems to automatically balance and try to use some of the future technologies.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, Question for Mohammed. What is the panel's opinion about flexible duct hoses in HVAC systems?
Let's let Todd take that one.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, it's very interesting. Ductwork is very much a regionally variable thing. So if you're up in the north, Midwest, up north, everything's going to generally be hard, square duct, rectangular duct. If you're down south where I am, most of the systems are going to use flexible duct or a combination of rigid trunks and flexible supply runs. And flex duct can be fine as long as it's installed properly and designed for. So flex duct does have greater static pressure drop or resistance to airflow. But as long as it's designed for in the system's design, again, back to the importance of a thorough duct design on every house, flex duct can work great. And
What's a
and
common mistake, Todd? What's a mistake in duct design that people make frequently?
Well, I think most of the mistakes are probably made in duct installation, not design. And I'd say the most common with flex duct is flex duct comes in 25-foot lengths typically, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to use all
Nope,
25
right.
feet
Or they
for every
leave the
run.
whole thing
Yeah, yeah. So
snaking through
if
the
you
attic.
snake
Yeah,
that and
right.
weave it, you're
Yeah,
going to lose tons of airflow out
right.
of that run.
Wasting
So
energy. Yep, yep,
that's right. They need to be
yep,
pulled taut and have very wide, smooth sweeps when they make a turn. But
right.
we
And that would make
used,
it harder to clean too, right? If it's the long, you get this long
oh, sure, if it's all
snake.
kinked and yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
kinked and
yeah,
snaked like that, definitely.
yeah. Good
Yeah.
question.
But on
Yeah,
bath fans, since we're talking ventilation, our standard, even though we're using a somewhat self-adjusting the Whisper Green fans with Panasonic, we still run hard pipe on all
yeah,
of our bath fan runouts. And then at the very end, we may transition to a short piece of flex to go out to the hood on the outside of the house or through the soffit. But that smooth, straight, hard pipe is going to give us the least amount of pressure resistance to flow on bath fans. So kind of depends on
yeah.
the application.
Okay, let's take two more, Mike.
All right, sounds good. Um, so Aaron had a question. I haven't heard anyone mention radon. How do
Mm.
mitigation systems fit into this conversation?
It depends, right, Todd?
Yeah, well, it does. It does. I can
Right.
speak to you. I can speak to you from a radon level 1 zone, which is, our home county, Greenville County, is the only level 1 radon county in South Carolina. So we're forced to install, well, forced by code, we have to install radon ventilation system, passive radon ventilation system. Really doesn't tie into any of these other ventilation systems we're talking about other than you want to give radon from beneath the slab or beneath the vapor barrier in the crawl space an easy
Yeah,
path to take up and out. And the
yeah,
EPA has some great resources on best practices for radon in our market. Um, the code requires a 3-inch diameter pipe. We use a 4 because EPA says, man, that 4-inch pipe will move a lot more air. And we put a radon passive radon ventilation system in every home, whether code requires it or not. So it is part of that comprehensive indoor air quality approach is
yeah.
to incorporate at least a passive radon venting system in every home.
And we
I
have,
think, I used to live up north and, where there's granite underground. And we had a lot of radon issues. And I remember a house where we put a radon fan out, but we depressurized the basement and it caused more radon to come in
Oh,
other
yeah,
areas of the basement. So, it kind of depends on your region again, right?
it
How you
does.
deal with that. I think the passive one would definitely be preferable if you can do it that way.
Well, and in every market, there's going to be an industry dedicated just to radon ventilation,
Mhm.
Right.
with radon
Right.
mitigation companies that are experts in that area.
Yeah.
I did want to point out if anybody has questions that don't get answered, we will answer all of them by email. So if you would, maybe Mike, you can collect them, send them to us. We'll make sure everybody gets your questions answered. Why don't you give us one more to answer live, and then the rest we'll do individually by email.
Yeah, I'll let Russell
Okay.
chime in on this radon
Okay.
issue. He wanted to say something, then I'll
Uh,
get to
uh,
our last one.
Okay.
no,
Sure. Sure.
so
Sorry,
there
Russell.
are some ERV systems, sometimes if you increase the air exchange rate, you can still reduce the amount of radon. But at the same time, if you're in one of those areas, we would still rather than trying to use a system that can help, we would say, create the solution instead. Do something like the
Yeah.
dedicated fan that's meant to deal with that specifically. Kind of
Yeah.
like cooking. You want to exhaust from the cooking device exact to the outdoors. We could ventilate with ventilation fans, but the best way to manage that is with a range hood. Same thing with radon. The best way is to manage that with a specific strategy for that region.
At the source. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, final question we're going to take here, and like I said, we'll get the other ones that we haven't gotten to, and we'll get those to our panelists. It comes from Netaniah. Are there methods available for informing and educating homeowners of the maintenance needed on ERVs. He apparently has seen units have become health hazards because occupants or new owners they don't ever go up in their attics, and the yearly maintenance is neglected. So, what advice do you both, from both the builder side, the manufacturer side, what advice do you guys give when it comes to the regular maintenance and upkeep of these systems?
You want to go first, Russ?
Yeah, so
Yep.
our exposure is limited. A lot of the time to, when the equipment is installed and the recommendations there. So, we still try to do all we can with social media and other means, but at some point, once it's turned over, they have to know that it's there, right? They have to know, especially when you have a buy and sell situation. The original owner knows probably because they had it installed, but then when that person moves out, how does the next person know? And I know a lot of builders are addressing that with actual manuals. So we see
Yeah.
a lot of them, like a lot of the folks in the ebook community will actually build this binder of, hey, this is your home. These are the things to take care of. And we include information.
Is there also an argument not to put it in the attic? Put it somewhere like a mechanical room or something where it's accessible, easier to get for somebody to
Yeah.
get to. Yeah.
Mechanical room, I think, close to the occupied space is always preferable, but square footage is
You don't
expensive.
always have it.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
always have it.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I'll
Well,
say that, some of our early ERV installs, we learned after the fact that maintenance was an issue and probably didn't appreciate the importance of that maintenance and regular filter changes ourselves and had failures of ERV systems because the homeowner didn't change the filter, didn't clean the ERV. So we do give our clients a homeowner manual, and there is information in there about the filters that need to be changed, but they have to read it. And when we come in at our 1 year visit, we do include changing all the filters for the homeowner and try to educate them as much as possible about the importance of that. We've kind of rolled out a maintenance plan. Haven't had many people take us up on it, but in trying to provide some accountability to making sure all of those components are maintained and updated regularly.
Yeah.
I will say in defense of the ERVs a little bit is you don't have, because I own two or three of them that I run all the time. It's just there's a little filter and then there's the core. So it's the little filter, and you don't have to do it that much. It's probably every few months I go in, I take it out, and usually replace it. But if you keep that filter clean, the core tends to stay clean. Now, I also have asked Panasonic about this. In the worst case scenario, you can replace the core after a few years, which is sort of that, the central, pretty easy, almost a DIY level replacement to put a new core in one. So they're about the same maintenance, I would say, as a mini split, where you got to take the filter out, you got to clean it. What would be nice, I would say, for something for you to think about, Russ, is if there was a reusable, renewable one, I would love that because the filters are kind of pricey when you got to keep, a regular supply of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a bunch of Panasonic people chomping at the bit
Working on
right
it.
now. I forgot to talk about a very important
Yeah.
feature of the ERVs now, and that's the fault indication. So
Okay.
part of the stuff that we've done, Todd, and you've heard it, Department of Energy has talked about this for a long time for the exact reason that people forget about it. We want to address that. So we do have fault indication display in the units now that give those reminders. Now it might be a chirp, kind of like that annoying smoke
Yeah.
alarm. You could override it, but we want to make sure that we're notifying people. We have new wall displays that really are handy, that it's visible and it gives those reminders, and it's measuring pressure in the unit to notify you need to maintain the product. The other
And that doesn't mean it's broken either. It just means
Just
probably
needs
you should clean the
maintenance.
filter.
Yeah. Clean the
Right, right.
filter.
So that's a nice heads up.
And we are introducing washable filters as well.
Oh,
So,
good.
and that's particularly important sometimes in multifamily, where,
Yeah.
when you're talking about going in and changing filters 3 or 4 times a year, and then maybe $10 filters and 500 units, you do the math,
Starts
that
to add
adds up really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the washable filter isn't as good, but it certainly costs a lot less.
Right, right,
Right.
It's a lot easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. Well, thank you guys. I think we better call it. I think everybody's got stuff to do, but thank you both, and I'll hand it back to Mike
Absolutely.
to sign us off.
Yeah, and thank you to Matt for leading the discussion. I really do appreciate it, Matt, Todd, Russell. Thanks so much for sharing your insight with us and our wonderful audience for all those questions that we got to and the ones that we didn't, but we will get to by email. I've been collecting those. And also thank you to Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions for their generous sponsorship of this webinar. Our next webinar, speaking of webinars, will take place in 2 weeks. It'll be on February the 11th. We'll be back with you to report on generational marketing. That's going to be with Sarah Gutterman. We'll get started at our usual time of 2 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, have a great Groundhog's Day and stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.
Thank you.